Life has a way of kicking you in the teeth when you least expect it. My name's Ryan, 36M, and I've been married to Jessica, 34F, for 10 years. We have 2 kids, a house in the suburbs, and what I thought was a solid marriage. Jessica works as a model. Nothing crazy, mostly catalog shoots, fitness campaigns, and the occasional artsy nude session. It never really bothered me. Or at least, it didn't until a few months ago. It started with little things. She'd come home exhausted but wouldn't say why. She was constantly on her phone, texting people she never mentioned before. Our sex life, which used to be wild, started dying out. And the biggest red flag? She started getting jumpy. Like full-blown panic attacks over nothing. One night, she woke up screaming. I shook her awake, heart pounding. Jess! What the hell? She gasped for breath, clutching her chest like she was having a heart attack. I just had a nightmare, she stammered. But it wasn't just one nightmare. It kept happening. She'd wake up drenched in sweat, shaking, sometimes even crying. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. I started paying closer attention, watching her. Jessica used to tell me everything about her shoots, where they were, who the photographers were, what kind of work she was doing. But suddenly she was vague. Oh, just another shoot, she'd say, brushing me off. One afternoon, while she was in the shower, I glanced at her phone. Locked. Jessica never locked her phone. Ever. That's when I made the decision. I was going to follow her. And what I found out. The next morning, Jessica left the house like nothing was wrong. Kissed me on the cheek, said she had a long shoot ahead of her, and walked out the door. I waited exactly 10 minutes, then grabbed my keys and followed. She wasn't heading to any agency or studio I recognized. Instead, she drove to a warehouse on the outskirts of the city, some rundown place that looked like it hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint in years. There were already a few cars parked outside, including one I knew wasn't just a coworker's. A black Mustang. I'd seen that car drop her off before, late at night, when she claimed she just grabbed drinks with the girls. My gut was screaming at me now. Jessica went inside, acting like she belonged there. I parked down the street, waited a few minutes, then made my way closer. Through a side window, I saw it. Jessica, standing in the middle of a makeshift studio, surrounded by at least 5 men, photographers, assistants, guys who were supposed to be working. She was already in lingerie, striking a pose while they circled her like wolves. I pulled out my phone, started recording. Then, something happened that made my blood run cold. One of the guys stepped forward, whispered something in her ear, and she laughed. A real, flirty, I'm about to do something nasty laugh. And then, she pulled the straps of her lingerie down. I stood there, gripping my phone so hard I thought I might crack the screen. Jessica didn't hesitate. She let the straps of her lingerie fall, standing there practically naked while those photographers circled her. One of them reached out and ran a hand down her side. She didn't flinch. She didn't push him away. She smirked. That's when I knew this wasn't just another modeling gig. This wasn't work. This was something else. I needed to see more. I moved along the side of the warehouse, looking for another vantage point. There was a small door in the back, cracked open just enough to hear what was going on inside. Come on, Jess, one of the guys chuckled. You said you wanted a challenge, right? Jessica let out a breathless laugh. I do. And I'm just getting started. Another voice chimed in. How many today so far? 9, she said, teasing. You want to be number 10? My stomach dropped. She had a fucking goal? This wasn't just cheating. This was her treating it like a fucking game. I should have burst in right then. Should have screamed at her, called her every name in the book. But I didn't. I waited. And what happened next? It was worse than I could have imagined. I stood there, frozen, my mind struggling to process what I had just heard. Jessica had a goal. A challenge. 10 men in one day. And from the way she was laughing, teasing them, she was proud of it. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. This wasn't just a one-time mistake. This wasn't some drunken lapse in judgment. This was my wife, the mother of my children, turning her body into some twisted fucking game. I should have walked away. Should have left, called my lawyer, and nuked our marriage from orbit. But I couldn't. I had to see it with my own eyes. I edged closer to the cracked door, my pulse pounding in my ears. Inside, Jessica leaned back against a couch, her robe slipping open. One of the photographers, some sleazy-looking asshole with a camera still hanging around his neck, stepped between her legs, his hands already on her. And she let him. No hesitation. No guilt. Just a slow, satisfied smile. I felt something inside me snap. Before I even realized what I was doing, I shoved the door open and stepped inside. The room went silent. Jessica's head snapped toward me, her smirk vanishing in an instant. Her eyes went wide, her face draining of color. "Ryan?" I stared at her, at the half-naked men surrounding her, at the fucking mess of it all. Then, I did something that made her scream. Jessica sat there, robe barely clinging to her shoulders, surrounded by half-naked men. The second she saw me, her entire body went stiff, eyes blown wide like she'd seen a ghost. The room reeked of sweat, cheap cologne, and betrayal. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I stepped forward, slow, controlled. I wanted her to feel every second of this. One of the photographers stumbled backward, nearly knocking over a light stand. Another guy, shirtless, grabbed his pants off the floor and bolted without a word. The others hesitated, waiting to see what I'd do. Jessica finally found her voice. "Ryan, I held up a finger. "Don't." Her lips snapped shut. I looked around the room, taking in the scene. The rumpled sheets on the couch. The scattered clothes. The camera still mounted on a tripod, its little red recording light blinking. I walked over to it, hit the stop button, and yanked the memory card out. Jessica lunged at me. "Give me that!" I sidestepped her, and she nearly fell on her face. "Sit. The fuck down," I said through gritted teeth. She froze, breathing hard. Then, slowly, she collapsed back onto the couch, her hands shaking. The last guy, some greasy-looking dude with a sleeve of tattoos, took a step toward me. "Hey man, no need to get crazy." I turned on him so fast he flinched. "Get the fuck out." He hesitated for half a second before grabbing his jacket and disappearing out the door. Now, it was just me and her. Jessica wrapped her arms around herself, like she was the victim here. Her whole body trembled. "Ryan, please, I wasn't thinking." I let out a short laugh. "No shit." Her breath hitched. "It didn't mean anything. 10 men in one day?" I cut her off. "Sure sounds like it meant something to you." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't falling for that. Not anymore. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. "You're disgusting." Her whole face crumpled. "Ryan, please don't leave me." I didn't say another word. I just turned around and walked out. I could hear her sobbing behind me. Could hear her breathing getting faster, more erratic. She wanted a challenge? Well, now she had one. Living with the fact that she destroyed everything. I didn't go home right away. I couldn't. I drove aimlessly, hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. My heart was still hammering, the image of Jessica sprawled out on that couch, surrounded by those men, burned into my skull. 10 men. In one day. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a lapse in judgment. This was a fucking goal she set for herself, like she was competing in some sick, twisted game. And the worst part? We had kids. Kids who were home, thinking their mom was just at work. Kids who had no idea the woman who kissed them goodbye in the morning was spending her day getting passed around by random men like some goddamn party favor. My stomach turned. I pulled into an empty parking lot and sat there, staring at the dashboard. I needed to calm down before I went home. The last thing I wanted was for my kids to see me like this. That's when my phone buzzed. Jessica. I ignored it. A minute later, another buzz. Then another. Then my phone exploded with messages. Jessica, 6:42 p.m. Ryan, please talk to me. Jessica, 6:45 p.m. I know you're mad, but please don't do anything stupid. Jessica, 6:49 p.m. Are you seriously going to ignore me? I said ID didn't mean anything. Jessica, 6:55 p.m. Answer me. Then a voicemail. I wasn't going to listen. I really wasn't. But something about the sheer desperation in her texts made me curious. I put the phone on speaker and hit play. Static at first. Then her voice, shaky, breathless. Ryan, please pick up. A sharp inhale. I can't breathe. I don't know what's happening. My chest, my heart is racing. I feel like I'm dying. She let out a sob, her breathing erratic. A panic attack. Good. I ended the voicemail and tossed my phone onto the passenger seat. I didn't give a single fuck about her panic attack. Not after what I'd seen. Not after what she chose to do. I sat there for a while, staring out at the city lights. Then, I shifted into drive and headed home. Jessica could drown in her own anxiety. I wasn't saving her. I pulled into the driveway, turned off the engine, and just sat there. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My pulse had slowed. But my mind was sharper than ever. Jessica was unraveling. That voicemail? That wasn't just panic, it was fear. She knew I wasn't going to forgive this. She knew there was no talking her way out of it. Good. I walked inside, and the second the door shut behind me, I felt a pair of small arms wrap around my waist. Daddy! My daughter beamed up at me, her little face full of pure love and innocence. My throat tightened. Hey, sweetheart. Where's Mommy? I swallowed the lump in my throat and crouched down to her level. Mommy's busy right now, she pouted. She said she'd be home for bedtime. I forced a smile. I know, baby. But I'm here, okay? Let's get you tucked in. I carried her upstairs, read her favorite bedtime story, and waited until her breathing evened out before slipping out of the room. As soon as I closed the door, my phone buzzed again. Jessica. Again. I answered, keeping my voice cold. What? She was sobbing. Ryan, I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't stop shaking. I feel like I'm dying. I leaned against the wall, staring at my reflection in the hallway mirror. Not my problem. She let out a choked gasp, like my words physically hurt her. Please, she whispered. Please just talk to me. I fucked up. I know I fucked up. But I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose our family. I laughed. Actually laughed. Our family? I repeated. You weren't thinking about our family when you were spreading your legs for every photographer in that fucking studio. Silence. Just her shaky breathing. Then a whisper. Are you going to leave me? I stared at my own reflection, feeling nothing but disgust. I already have. And then I hung up. Jessica wanted a challenge? Now she had one. living with the fact that she'd lost everything. Jessica finally came home the next morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee, when I heard the front door open. She walked in looking like hell, hair a mess, makeup smeared, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. Her hands were shaking as she clutched her purse. The second she saw me, her eyes filled with fake relief. "Ryan," she breathed. I thought you wouldn't be here." I sipped my coffee, completely unfazed. "Why? So you could sneak in and pretend nothing happened?" She winced but quickly replaced it with anger. "You abandoned me last night," she snapped. "You ignored me while I was having a panic attack. Do you even care about me anymore?" I set my mug down, staring at her with pure disgust. "Do you care about anyone but yourself?" she scoffed. "I made a mistake." I stood up so fast she actually flinched. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is saying something hurtful in an argument. What you did," I leaned forward, voice low, "that was a choice. Over and over again." Her bottom lip trembled. "I was trying to feel something, Ryan. You don't get it. I've been so lost." I laughed in her face. "So your solution was to fuck 10 random men? That's your idea of therapy?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "You don't understand what it's like to be me. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, how I have to stay desirable in this industry. I just wanted to prove I still had it." I shook my head, disgusted. "And you lost everything in the process." She let out a choked sob, her hands shaking worse now. I... A sudden thud echoed through the house. Jessica's head snapped toward the stairs. The kids. I turned and saw my son, standing halfway down, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He looked between us, confused. "Mom? Why are you crying?" Jessica froze. For the first time since I caught her, she wasn't yelling. She wasn't lying. She wasn't making excuses. She looked ashamed. I exhaled sharply and turned to my son, softening my voice. "Buddy, go back upstairs. I'll make breakfast soon, okay?" He hesitated, glancing at Jessica, before nodding and heading back up. I waited until he was out of sight before looking at her again. "Pack your shit," I said coldly. "You're leaving today." Her breath hitched. "You can't do this." I stepped closer, my voice a low growl. "Watch me." For the first time, she knew, really knew, this was over. And for the first time, she had nothing to say. Jessica didn't move. She just stood there, shaking, staring at the stairs like she could rewind time if she concentrated hard enough. I wasn't going to let her. "Did you hear me?" I said, stepping closer. "Pack your shit." She turned back to me, eyes wide with panic. "Ryan, please. Let's talk about this. We can fix it." I shook my head. "There's nothing to fix." She stepped forward, reaching for my arm. "I love you." I pulled away. "No, Jessica. You love attention. You love the thrill, the game, the way men look at you. But love, you don't even know what that fucking means." Tears spilled down her face. "You can't just throw me away like this." I laughed bitterly. "You already threw yourself away." Her breathing turned erratic again, and I saw it happening, another panic attack creeping in. She clutched her chest, sucking in frantic breaths, her body locking up. Ryan, I can't breathe." I crossed my arms, watching her unravel. She looked up at me with pleading, tear-streaked eyes. "Help me." For years I would have. I would have held her, told her to focus on her breathing, helped her through it. But now, I just watched. "You should probably call one of your 10 boyfriends," I said coldly. "Maybe one of them gives a shit." Her face twisted in agony. "I'm still the mother of your children." I exhaled sharply, glancing at the stairs again. That was the only reason I wasn't throwing her out this second. You've got an hour, I said finally. Then I want you gone. She stared at me for a long moment before her hands fell limply to her sides. For once, she didn't argue, didn't scream. She just turned and walked upstairs to pack. I sat back down, picked up my coffee, and took a sip. It was the best damn coffee I'd ever had. Jessica barely made it halfway up the stairs before she collapsed. 1 second, she was gripping the railing, her breath sharp and uneven. The next, she let out a strangled gasp and crumpled to the floor, clutching her chest like she'd been shown. Her body started trembling violently. Her breaths turned into frantic, shallow gasps. I can't breathe, she wheezed. I didn't move. I just watched. She rolled onto her side, eyes darting around wildly. Ryan, please, I think I'm dying. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Or maybe you're just feeling what it's like to lose control for once. Her hands curled into fists against her chest. Call someone. I tilted my head. Why? You weren't thinking about your health when you were fucking half the city yesterday. Tears streamed down her face, her body still shaking. I swear something's wrong. Then her eyes rolled back for a second, and that's when I sighed and pulled out my phone. As much as I wanted to let her sit in her own misery, I wasn't about to have my kid's mother die on the damn staircase. I dialed 911. The operator picked up immediately. What's your emergency? My wife's having a panic attack, I said flatly. Or a heart attack. Honestly, I don't give a shit. Just send someone. Jessica whimpered on the floor, curling into herself. Don't do this to me. I crouched down next to her. Oh, don't get it twisted. You did this to yourself. 15 minutes later, an ambulance pulled up. 2 paramedics rushed in, taking one look at Jessica's shaking, hyperventilating form before loading her onto a stretcher. One of them turned to me. Is she on any medication? I shrugged. No idea. Maybe ask the 10 other guys she spends her time with. Jessica sobbed harder as they strapped an oxygen mask over her face. As they wheeled her out the door, she reached for me. Ryan, please! I just watched her go. The second the ambulance doors shut and drove away, I finally exhaled. For the first time in years, the house was quiet, and I wasn't in a hurry to hear her voice again.